Have you ever wondered how something as crazy as gender feminism got such a strong hold on the average person's thinking? Have you ever wondered why there has been so little dissent to it despite all the carnage in its destructive path? In today's talk, we will take a look at precisely how that happened with an overview of what I call the 10 immutable laws of men and women. That's coming up next on An Ear for Men. Hi everyone, Paul Eilam here, and welcome back to An Ear for Men. Most sensible people, when examining the belief system of feminists, will simply scratch their heads and wonder how the hell anyone ever took feminist ideas seriously. It's as though feminists just sat around and made up a bunch of nonsensical gibberish, branded it, and the culture around them added it to its collective shopping list like it was some tasty junk food. And that is pretty much what happened. The question, though, remains why and how. Well, I've sketched out the answer to that question with the 10 immutable laws of men and women. Now, of course, I should qualify that these laws are not really immutable. Hell, they aren't even really laws in the truest sense. There will be exceptions, and I'm guessing if you're watching this channel, you're one of them. Just the same, they do serve as a guideline, and I think a highly reliable one, to not only explain what has happened with feminism, but also as a predictor of what is likely to come in the future. That said, let's get started. And we'll start with the 5 immutable laws of men. Law number 1. Men will not oppose anything perceived to benefit women. The drive in men to protect and provide for women and their children is often more powerful than their own drive to survive and much more powerful than their charity to other men. Note that this law says perceived. It doesn't matter if something actually benefits women, or if it has no impact, or if in fact it harms women. If the popular perception is that something benefits women, men will support it more or less blindly. They'll support it even if they see it hurting other males, up to and including their own sons. Law number 2. Men will act as enforcers. They will attack and shun other men for violating law number 1. The perception qualification still applies. In the social, legal, and political realms, men will attack verbally and physically other men who are perceived to either harm women or who oppose anything perceived to protect women. In fact, in the minds of men, those two things, harming women or opposing a mindless and destructive attempt at their supposed protection, are literally the same thing. Men conflate and often confuse harming women with simply refusing to grant them special protections. This includes the refusal to enable women at the expense of men and boys. Law number 3. Men have almost no limits on how far they will go regarding adherence to laws number 1 and 2. This includes the fact that men will watch their own families ripped apart by corrupt courts. They will suffer false allegations, alienation from their children, loss of home and income, endure suicidal impulses, and ultimately react to all of it with self-blame and will in fact tell other men who experience those problems they need to shut up or man up and take it. Law number 4. Men will not complain collectively about anything that happens to them as a class. Attacks and affronts to men as a group will not cause an effective collective group reaction. Ever. You can imprison them, beat them, steal their property, demonize their sons, psychologically destroy their children, physically mutilate their sons, relegate them to the streets, tax them and spend their money on other groups, and as men, they will not react. Again, ever. Indeed, men will, in accordance with laws number 1 and 2, assist the state in the furtherance of such abuses as long as the dominant public perception is that it is done in the name of protecting women. Law number 5. Anomalous men, or those who consciously oppose laws 1 through 4, will nonetheless obey them out of fear of shame and rejection. And now 5 more immutable laws for women. Law number 1. Women will not oppose anything perceived to benefit them as a group. On the surface, this may seem innocuous and even just human, but it results in some very inhumane things. As a group, women will not oppose anything, no matter how destructive it may be to others and ultimately themselves, if they perceive an immediate benefit or privilege. They won't, as a group, oppose all-male selective service, all-male genital mutilation, taking the lion's share of resources produced by men and redistributing it to women, or any other injustice that works in their favor. They will not oppose clearly oppressive and unconstitutional laws as long as they perceive a benefit to women. They will not oppose the disappearance of men from education and the workplace as long as they perceive it works to their advantage. Women will not object to disproportionate attention to breast cancer versus prostate cancer, female victims versus male victims of any crime, the deification of girls and the demonization of boys in our schools. They will not object to the blanket tolerance of false allegations, male suicide, male homelessness, or any other social malady in favor of the focus being placed on problems that affect women, even when those problems are manufactured and do not exist. In short, women as a group will collectively step over the bodies of dead men in order to complain about imaginary problems that would not amount to much even if they existed. Law number 2. Women will attack and shun other women for violating law number 1. The women who violate that law are frequently considered traitors to other women, and they will be marginalized and ostracized. The nature and scope of the attacks against them are generally less extreme than those against men, but they are completely real. Women will attack and shun other women for supporting any ideas that do not include women as the primary and often sole beneficiaries of social services, special legal protections, government subsidies, and even deference to opinions. Women, by and large, are women first and women only. Law number 3. Women have virtually no limits on how far they will go regarding adherence to laws number 1 and 2. This includes willingness to see their own children psychologically damaged in the name of personal advantage and will, in fact, inflict that damage themselves without remorse. Women will demonstrate the willingness to tolerate the abuse of male loved ones and will watch in silence as those men are destroyed by the state and other entities for the advantage of other women. Periodically, they may experience outrage over how that abuse and destruction impacts the men they hold dear, but it will not translate into any meaningful outrage over what happens to men as a class. Law number 4. Women will complain collectively about whatever happens to them as a group, regardless of whether it is really happening. The only requirement is the perception that there's a problem. Women as a group will complain for decades about long debunked injustices against them and refuse to even entertain evidence to the contrary. Men do this too, but they do that for women, not for themselves. The point of law number 4 for women is that it informs government and corporate entities that in order to create social momentum sufficient to pass laws and justify political policy, all it needs to do is frame information, accurate or not, in a way that paints women as a victim class. Law number 5. Anomalous women, or those who consciously oppose laws 1 through 4, will nonetheless obey them out of fear of shame and rejection, as well as with the added appeal to their privilege. And that is the point of bringing up a discussion about these laws. You might ask yourself how so many bad statistics on social issues get such wide and unchallenged acceptance. How does the routine abridgment of civil liberties we so steadfastly used to cherish now go on unchecked? How does such suffering go ignored? How do you convince an entire society that a bunch of middle-class white girls, the ultimate children of privilege, whose biggest challenge in life is when the local Starbucks runs out of syrup for their vanilla latte, are somehow representative of a class of oppressed, put-upon damsels in distress? Well, it's in the same way you convince them that our coal mines, semi-trucks, commercial fishing boats, and battlefield slaughter zones are all dominated by an elitist class of oppressors enjoying privilege at the expense of the downtrodden. You do all of it with the skilled application of the 10 laws. No one will stop you, and very few will even try. This is all a pretty bleak picture. It is easy to question the wisdom of trying to change any of it, and indeed any effort to change this on a large scale are doomed. Human beings are destructively, pathologically gynocentric. It is a problem rooted so deeply in our human existence that it defies systemic resolution. Simply put, we have no real answer to this, and our culture will continue on a downward anti-male spiral till it implodes and the resultant destruction creates a broken society that requires a sweeping reset between the sexes. For the time being, our solutions can only be found on the individual level, and those solutions are reserved for a limited amount of men with the insight and self-confidence to manage on their own without the full acceptance of the world around them. And that, of course, comes down to a decision. And you know what that decision is. Right. Red pill or blue. Sometimes that choice isn't easy, but it could not be more clear. Blue pills are for guys who need them, guys for whom group consensus is more important than self-respect. They are men for whom going with the flow is a safe space, a warm, fuzzy blanket protecting them from a world that is cold and dismissive of men who find their own way. They are for guys who think manning up is more important than being a human being, guys who think having a woman is more important than having a woman they can trust. They are the guys who live by the 10 laws, playing right into the hands of corrupt governance and consumerism without even knowing they exist. Red pills, on the other hand, are not for men who need them. They're for men who want them. They are for men who can swim upstream and who indeed count on swimming upstream to keep them strong. They are guys who choose freedom over fear, fact over fiction, and fortitude over fawning. They read the 10 laws, shrug, and feel little to nothing, say perhaps a little pity for men who choose to live by them. Personally, I don't much care how other men choose to live. I do know, though, which men I like, and certainly which men I respect.